So first of all, thanks to Photo South Asia for supporting this generously. And thanks to, yes, and thanks to all the contributors. We just don't have one of them, Kushanabu, with us. So this publication emerges, essentially, we thought about it because we felt that, after this gathering, they should have an afterlife. And it can live through this book till we hopefully meet again. And this sort of, it emerges from a shared recognition that archives are defined as much by what they exclude as by what they contain. And that's what we've been sort of discussing the last couple of days. We see this across essays by Jerry Pinto, Amarnath Praful, a photo, oh shit, where are they? I'm so sorry. They are absent. Okay, we have to hold this for a minute. Yeah, you guys, we need 2 chairs. Nay, just come, just come. Okay, that's like my bad. See, yeah, this is like comic relief. Okay, so yeah, so a photo essay, a very interesting photo essay, that things that you've never really seen before visually, by the Tandel Fund of Archives. Kushanabu Chaudhary, who unfortunately couldn't join us. And a very, very telling and beautiful conversation between Adira, and she went to Delhi to interview the Anita Singh about her process. So the book also carries that, right? I was keen to bring together both photographic and non-photographic practitioners. And I think what has emerged is an extended understanding of the archive. So Jerry writes about the archive as a state of vertigo, something that unsettles rather than stabilizes. Kushanabo thinks of the archive as a one-eyed cyclops, where just like the camera, what is included is always defined by what is left out. Amar turns our attention to the periphery of the image, where meaning begins to shift. And in Adira's conversation, Dayanita Singh speaks of living within her archive, where there is literally no separation between life and its documentation. Across these approaches, photography is not a stable record, but a site of negotiation between memory and erasure, evidence and interpretation, presence and loss. This negotiation of what to keep, what to discard, what is worthy of remembering is constant and perhaps never resolved. I remember this story that I heard many years ago of an artist from Calcutta called Lalu Shaw, who's quite well known today, but when he was much younger, and he'd gone to Paris for a residency, and he came back and he was very underwhelmed. And all his friends were asking him, like, why are you not saying enough? So he, after much prodding, he said, I mean, it was okay. I went to the Louvre and I went to this museum and all of that. But I mean, they have just kept everything so it's so sanitized. So finally, I told them, if you come to my city, Calcutta, during Durga Puja, and I'll show you how we make these idols with clay and hay and our hands. And we adorn these idols, and after 5 days, we throw them in the river. And I think that kind of really stayed with me. And I was always, I kind of stayed away from the idea. I don't even know how I got interested in the archives, because this is a question that I have been thinking about for a very, very long time. In the book, in the foreword, there is one picture that accompanies the foreword, which is it's a diptych that is from it's the only memory of my family's history from Maimunshing in present-day Bangladesh. And that image didn't exist in our lives while growing up, And my father, a few years ago when I went home, I encountered it. And he thinks more and more about this homeland that he has actually never encountered and never will. But to think that for an entire family and an entire lifetime spent there, that is literally the only memory we have, actually. So I want to begin with a shared question to all of you. So Kushanabo, who's not here, but I thought that it might be an interesting thing to start with. He writes in the book, knowing the archive's origins, and by this he's writing about the extractive colonial archive. Knowing the archive's origin, one may ask why we would archive or preserve at all. For what purpose would we embalm the living and breathing elements of our cultural creations? And my question is to whoever would like to answer, because it's like a central question. Why do we do this? So who wants to go?
I would take issue with that remark, because I do not think of the archive as embalming anything that is alive. I do not think also that there is any way that we can evade the responsibility to archive, simply because of this. We have some duty to the past and we have some duty to the future. We are only stewards of our material heritage. It will all pass through us. To assume that we do not have a responsibility to it is to assume that we will allow mass-scale destruction. And at any moment, if you want an answer to this, think of the moment when the Bamiyan Buddhas were blown up. And when you saw that live on TV, how shaken you were. And a friend of mine turned to me and said, for once I'm happy that the British Museum took some things and hid them away, and they will be safe. We know now that Western civilization is also balanced on a fine point. And those places of safety are no longer places of safety. We don't know how long they will be safe. If Donald Trump can choose to end the US postal system, Keir Starmer could just say, let's sell the whole of the contents of the British Museum to whoever wants it. My problem with the archive is always the closed archive. The open archive is always going to be a place of rejuvenation, of excitement, of discovery, and of a reminder that what you felt today has been felt before. And what you are feeling now, if you record it in some way, whether it is with pen or paper, or with a camera, or with whatever tool you choose, will be a reminder of a continued heritage, a DNA of emotion, a DNA of feeling.
Yeah. I also want to ask y'all because you are recording not from the outside, but your own history. What do you feel about this?
So we are in Goa and we are near the estuary. And I think we all, as an archivist, we are a bridge between what people can't see, and it's like, for me, way from locality of mine where I stay or where I come from is very crucial. How I see estuary as an metaphor, and it's bridge between land and the ocean. And what happens in the estuary is very interesting thing. There is an exchange which happens. So these bridges, we all are the bridges, and which is important because people are busy with their lives, and what we are doing, somewhere universe is collecting, universe is constantly evolving, and because of modernization we have lost our connection with our land. And means I don't want to explain much, but it is very important to be bridge. That bridge is important. And this estuary, we all are estuaries. We have different way of thinking, which is important to share knowledge with the universe also, because some people can't, many people can't share, which we can be. We can be bridge for universe also, or the people who maybe someday they will be awake or someday they will not be awake. But it's our very, very important responsibility. That's what I see as archives.
I think, yeah, that's something I guess we all share, which is why we are here. But I think it's an interesting question to think about. And I also am interested to, for example, with Amar or Adira, either if you can talk about it, because I think this whole turn towards the interest in the archives and why we archive is also kind of newish, you know, I would think, in the way that we are doing it, right? As educators, what would you have to say about that? Where do you see that going? How are the younger people responding to it?
Yeah, I think. Can you hear me? Yeah. I think education and history is has a kind of, especially in India, um, has a very tight and tense relationship. I think the classroom um, inadvertently can't hear. Now it's okay. Yeah. I was saying education and history has a kind of interconnected, tense relationship. Often the classroom becomes a site where consequences of histories play out. And we are also faced with an attempt to understand knowledge systems, which are also consequences and verbs of history, history as a kind of ongoing act. I think the dissertation projects, or let's say the archive, also has a strange relationship embedded with photography. And we talk about photography as part of history, past, all of that, but also as an ongoing sort of mirror to time, history, etc. Often students and teachers are not entirely aware of this philosophical climate. Often it is classwork, it is, oh, that page is not aligning. You have to correct the grammar, or what is the contract that you're building with this particular set of images or collections. But once that pragmatic kind of texture moves a bit, one understands two things very clearly. That history is very active, or the archive is an active species that kind of activates many histories. And this is very important, not just one history, that there are contradictions, nuances, misgivings, failures, gaps, mythologies, participating and often fighting with each other for validation. And now it looks very useless. No, why are we? There is a kind of resistance. Why are we talking about history? Because it has such a unproductive connotation, especially in a design college.
Sure.
Yeah, and the ambition that the world sets the design student to go towards, right? Because it's that ambition looks at a complete erasure of history. To say that I don't have any history, I am a fresh human being every single day, and I'm going to make fresh profit, right? So I think it's also, in a way, to catch, to say that stop, look. Oh, there is a complicated set of photographs. Oh, there you can't see anything. Look again, please. Why do you think that border is off? Why do you think that this person was missing, etc.? So for me, at that level of facing history, this becomes a small thread that makes a kind of friction. Yeah, I've lost the question now.
No,
But
that
yeah,
was good. That was good. That was. Yes, yes.
It may well be a source of our privilege that we are allowed to feel fatigue with the archive and to ask that question. But in a nation where many people have not had a chance to archive themselves, surely we should be resistant to questions like this about whether the archive is dead or whether the archive is embalming when people have not started. I am reminded constantly of the way, British authors would write about the death of the novel. A big gade. Some people have not started writing novels in their language. So how can you declare the novel is dead? Maybe the middle class novel is dead for you as a British person, but please don't tell everybody the novel is dead. The novel has not yet not been born in some languages.
I think it's also about what we consider the archive. And I think that also, this whole brick and mortar space, temperature controlled, and I think there is that image of the archive. And I think what we've been doing here is really everybody's breaking that idea of the archive, right? Would you like to add to that?
Okay, I hope you can hear me. No? Can you hear me now? Is it better? No? Okay, is it better now? Okay, so I see the problem throughout the day now, finally. So I'll speak in the context of the interview that I did with Anita, saying that's part of this publication. Although I'm also an educator like Amar in another life, so I can fully relate to what you say about the push and pull of history within the archive and the challenges that it presents. But in my conversation with Anita, saying she's an artist who is very attuned to the ability of photography to be a very specific medium that works with time. And I think that's a fantastic thing about photography that is so specific to the medium. That if you photograph someone for 20 years, that's more valuable in any case, even if it is not shown at all. Because you see a life, we've seen so many family albums. The child is born and the child grows up and the child gets married and that child then dies. So then all this entire lifespan that you see. And I think for me, what was the most fascinating in looking at her practice was to see the progress of time. And I think that's a gift of photography. And it is uniquely in that way suited for, it allows itself to be an archive in a way that many other documents perhaps not so easily lend itself to. So there's also that ability in photography, and which then allows for it to also be played with. And I think that's also something that we've seen in the practices of so many of the artists we've looked at, that there's an ability within photography to play with time, the push and pull of time. So you build the archive, and then you can deconstruct it, you can play with it, you can shift time around, and that playfulness of the artist comes in there. But I think the core practice of photography is always to then first build that archive. So you have a 20-year practice, a 30-year practice, and then you can look back and extract and mine the archive, which is the title of the piece, which is what her practice is really about. She's mining an archive that she has built of her own practice as a photographer. So it's those relationships that she's built with people. She's been friends with them for 20 years, 30 years, seen generations grow up. And then it's only now that the work then can be called an archive, because otherwise it's just the ordinary work of a photographer. You're there and you're with people and you photograph. This is, in its simplest way, that's what photography allows us.
So,
I disagree, but
yes, please.
Like your question was like, why you want to archive is very important for us, because it's a socially engaged. Our practice is about socially engaged archives. It's not our archives. It's collective knowledge. It's world knowledge, and somewhere we are thinking methodology, which is decolonized one. It's not like there are a list of things that it happens very spontaneously with the flow, and here people, it's not us who own the Tandel Fund of Archives. So as I say, we are the estuary, and it's people, and it's for the people and by the people. That is more important for us.
I love we are all estuaries.
We find ourselves very lucky to activate 3 generations in that case. It's the younger, the older, as well as the current one. Because I understand when there are interactions happening, it's not only the exchange of ideas, but exchange of minds that happen across 3 generations. I've always said that, India is all about narratives. And those narratives are actually creating, helping us build an archive in a different way. So it's becoming more personal, more local, and then it's going to more global level as we take it forward as artists. So I think those levels and those areas are very important when you look at community as personal spaces. And we are very lucky to have, activated those minds and spaces in the community.
And you'll see yourselves more as facilitators in this
Yeah.
sense, right?
Also, where we have worked, they love us. And that is important for us. The love is important, not the hate or anger. It's everybody till now in our village, they love us. That word is important.
You know, when I was working on my first book, The Armenians of Calcutta, so I'm not Armenian, obviously. And I think this was my biggest worry, like how, although it was quite collaborative, but my worry was how would they receive the work? And I think it's only when they kind of validated it, then I was like, so that's a huge responsibility. And I think it's quite different when you're working not from within the community as you are, yeah, so it was quite nerve wracking for me, I do have to say. Yes, yes.
Before, the new generation was very reluctant in wearing the attire. So once this has been started, they have started enjoying the attire too. So that's a really a big accomplishment for the community in some way, that they have started at least liking their own attire, which was missed for a very long span in almost 20 to 30 years since we lost the last generation. So that's a big accomplishment for the community, I would say. And we being mediums, we are very lucky to have that.
Yeah, and also the dictionary. I think that's a huge accomplishment.
Just one more, it's like we'll keep on talking, but it's the archive was always socially engaged because being a sculptor, I thought, why not the minds can be molded way I sculpt and mold sculpture, because I always thought that bringing 1,000 figures in one painting or photographing 1,000s of 10,000s of people is very easy, but bringing minds together and mold them and create love, empathy, which is important for my people. And because of that, they will create hope in them. That was the idea of the TFA.
Yeah, I think that you've done very successfully. I have a question for Jerry. So your essay is called Archive as a State of Vertigo. What about encountering the archive destabilizes us?
Okay, I think to begin with, I really loved what you said as we are all estuaries. And I think your next book should be called We Are All Estuaries. I just think that as an idea becomes so fertilizing and wonderful. The second thing I loved was that you are loved, and very few Vrunda, we love you, but very few archivists are loved in that sense because they're generally barriers. That's the problem is, I think, he talked about my people. Who are your people? Who are your people? Right? Now we destabilize each other because very often what happens is the encounter is meant to be nourishing, but it can often be waned by a lot of political and economic tensions. Let's face it, there's only that much money, and everybody is looking for that slice of money, as Menka knows, right? Okay. So while we all sort of like surge out, completely sure that this thing that I am archiving is of great value, you have to now persuade somebody who is a gatekeeper that it is of value, and they have their own set of criteria, which you hate. You hate their criteria because their criteria are never your criteria, right? They never, last year we were doing health. This year we are doing women. Okay, but my project still has value. Okay, now, all this I could not put in there because I was I mean I don't really sometimes know how much honesty an essay can hold before it starts blowing itself up. Before you, like, the people who are reading it think, why did we ask him? Maybe not a good idea. So if we do not actually admit to ourselves that there is an element in this tribe that we have constituted, a tribe of people interested in archives, in history, in a way of looking, that there are also tensions, and that there are also places where, people are not each other's best friends. Okay. If we don't do that, then what we get is hypocrisy. Okay, so it's air kissing hypocrisy, and that is the death of the real community, the tribe. If the tribe is to live, the tribe must look into each other's eyes and say, I hate you, you got that prize, that award. Yeah, I should have got it. But now that you've got it, I love you again, and I'll get over it, it's okay. Okay, but right now I'm tense. Okay, and we don't do this shit. We need to just, like, if we could be as naked as we want the archive to be for us, yeah, we would find in each other archives of resilience and of resistance and of encouragement and support. But this is such a high cost in vulnerability, such a high cost in danger, literally danger, okay, that we're not going to do it. But we need to strive towards that. We need to struggle with that. And if we can't see that as the goal, that if each of us as an archive can't be naked to other people as archives, why ask the archive to be that way? Yeah?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that brings me to Adira, because Jerry's talking about access, and you were living inside the Anita's archive, and which is, again, a very different kind of an archive. We haven't quite seen that, right? So what was your experience of that, of living inside somebody else's very intimate archive? And also, I know you spoke about time, but what were you personally looking to draw from it?
So I've always found Anita Singh to be a very fascinating artist, not just because she has this sort of great body of documentary work, which is like solid documentary photography, but also that she's a conceptual artist in the way that she plays with the medium. So when I went to interview her in Delhi, I was staying in her apartment, and it's really like living inside someone's brain. And I feel like that is what happens when you go to any artist's home. And you spend some time there, you really feel like you understand, okay, like this is the way that their mind ticks, you can sort of hear it in the air, and you can smell it almost, And so she said that, she can live her life inside her archive, and she built her archive so that she could live in it. And that's physically true. The tone of wood of her furniture is the same tone of wood as the frames that adorn her images, or the structures are built from that same tonality of teak wood, So I found that to be, it's almost as if the archive subsumes you in a way, and you start to realize that you're also becoming a part of that archive, that the conversation is happening inside that home. Now that home flavors it in a way, and that's there in the essay as well. I'm smelling the home, I'm seeing the way the tiles are, and that influences the way that I see the work. And I feel like it has changed it forever now. And now I know something about the inside of her life that's always going to make me see the work differently. So I think that's an interesting thing about being someone who's going inside an artist's brain, inside their home, inside their very personal, vulnerable space, and then asking them, why are you doing what you do, And so it's asking them to think from within their soul, in a sense. So I don't know. I mean, like, for me to draw that out, it was not necessarily that I went with a question of, okay, I'm going to ask you what is an archive and why do you make archives. It was more to understand why is she living inside her own archive? You know, why no distance? Why is there this intense need to inhabit it and make it her entire life? So I don't think I have an answer for that, but it was something that it was something that I was sort of experiencing, and the essay sort of reflects that, I think.
No, it absolutely does. And I think I want to just go to Amar after that, because when you work with students' works, which is archives from a very far away land, so this is a kind of closeness and access. And then there is work from very far away lands, people you will never encounter, don't know much about them. And then you talk about these many histories that emerge from the hinterlands, so to speak. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think the premise is that it's not absent, but has been marginalized by a systemic sort of set of circumstances. So there is no absent archives in that sense. And the premise is that it's not found, but actually excavated by very thoughtful processes. Another set of provocations or surfaces that I think about in the classroom is also to really be done with this question of the archive, you know, and to sort of open it up and to think of it as a constellation where if one piece is not there, it doesn't make any sense, or it doesn't have to sort of it can transform into something else, that it does not have to adhere to an exhaustive completion. It does not have to attach itself to a stamp of originality. It does not have to perform a certain validity, but just to have a constellation and a possibility. So often I'm at this, I mean, as I speak, I'm also thinking, and it's also counterintuitive to some of the things that I had thought of, that trying to detect value in the archive, that is a negotiation. It's not a fix it. You know, you have to think about it in ways perhaps beyond other systems that ascribe that value. You know, to say that I know that a woman photographer from Malabar would be excellent. You know, this is the, but we don't have that at the moment in the archive, right? But how do we now look at what is available? Now, these are some questions that I think of, no? That to sort of really be in service of apparition, really be in service of circulation, of flux, of images not being fixed entries or fixed ideas that import when we look at them again 50 years later, 30 years later, that very same idea. But to say that the images have traveled through time and has been corrupted beautifully, no? And we as seers, thinkers of images, are also galvanized by other forces when I think of it. So this becomes very important for me to think of archive not as a solid entity, not as one person's. So I also think that the photographers or the custodians are not only the people who can speak about the archive, right? I firmly believe that a classroom and a person who has nothing to do with that place can actually start speaking about the other. It is the methodology that validates everything. So I feel that I am not familiar with that conversation of archive, but archiving, archives, those are the collections, constellations, those are the temporary curations, those are the areas that make things alive and activated for me. When it becomes solid, it loses interest and potency.
Yes, yes.
Just from what Amarnath was saying, I remember Divya Kawasji's grandmother's bloomers, great-grandmother's bloomers. That moment when they came up on the screen, everybody knew what she was talking about. Yeah, and 50 years ago, such a moment would not have been tolerated in an archive. An archive did not contain your great-grandmother's underwear. But as soon as she showed it, everybody felt something. There was some kind of frisson that we had, which was to do with partly with the unclad, the clad, the naked and the covered, the hidden and the revealed, the sensitivity of it, the covering of it, the fact that this was covering something. It was just, I saw it as multivalent in that moment. And I think that's what he's pointing at, that every object in some ways deserves attention, love, respect, careful seeing and believing in.
Yeah, and then this thing of this meaning changing, because obviously every person is going to have a different interpretation, and there is something about entering it, finding meaning, leaving an imprint, but not really taking anything away. I think that's like a huge challenge that I think each one of us, whoever's working with it, will face all the time. I wanted to ask y'all if y'all want to read maybe a little bit, if you want to, or nobody's willing to. Okay. If anybody has any questions, then you can. But I did have one last question actually for Parag, because I'm very fascinated by your method where you use a photographic process, which is cyanotype, but you choose not to photograph. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, like actually, it's a long process, and I'm trying to understand what is happening in the practice. You have to be very alert what is going on and why you are doing. Like I bought recipes into it, and then because earlier they were drawings, and if you see my drawings, there aren't any human figures into it. Lots of artists take human figures, but I know what I don't want to do. I have kept them aside because I really want to play with these images, what I have seen, or whole my practice, which if you see, there is one book in first part of the book, Ramesh Nakwa, who was my mamu, and he has sung the songs. My practice is like he always uses some fish into the every song, and I felt that why not just small thing. Just I don't want to explore anything else. Just this is the only thing I want to do, and then it becomes very challenging for me also, because I have to think a lot, and process is very long kind of. And also I studied in JJ School of Art, the academy school, and there the landscape is kind of so conditioned colonial idea, and way I have grown up is I never played with any toy. Like our stories or our imaginary games were about ocean or Fateh Mari, that is sea trading. I still have a complaint that I never became Tandel in that game. That was my idea. Like it's kind of worry. I was always worried. They are not making me Tandel anytime. Means all my cousins, we were in a joint family, but even Kadambari is like बहुत पानी आ गया, यानी बारिश हो गया, and then there is high tide, and there are lots of lakes and पानी आता है, then we all come out and fish, like gutter में जाके भी fish, छोटा net लेने का, so that all comes into in my practice. But one more example, I was talking to Akshay and now, and which is very funny. My mom is like some kind of pop-up museum. She comes up with the idea. Like, when I passed out from Baroda MSU, I came home, Bombay, and I started drawing. I didn't have studio, and I was sitting in kitchen, and I told her if I am not succeeding in art, like, then I'm going to sell fish. So she was cleaning fish and her head was down and she just promptly said, anyways, you are drawing fish and selling fish only, no? So I like way she sees my practice and she understands that, okay, he's selling fish. She understands that. But I'm going around your question, but I'm still exploring cyanotype in different ways. And also, I'm going to use many other historical ways of printing which resonate with my practice, which is very slow processed kind of, because my main practice is sculpture, and this is kind of side hustles, or sometimes I had to draw something like for sculpture, and I don't want to show. Usually I don't show drawings anytime. Like most of the times I avoid drawings because I want to be sculptor. I love sculpture, and it's kind of, I'm pakka sculpture wala. But see, there isn't any answer for your question because it's kind of long journey which I'm going to do it. But I like way the sun is the intangible medium in it, because I have grown up seeing sun as an intangible method in our fishing practice. Like way I said, I designed a slide for that when sun rises, planktons come, for then photosynthesis happen, and then fish follow planktons, phytoplanktons, then large fish come, and we see the movement. I'm talking about artisanal fishing in that. So I'm just connecting with that, and I'm staying. Right now, I'm stopping like for on that idea only.
Yes, yes.
Uh, Whenever we talk about archives, we talk about tangible forms, But when we talk about TFA as an archive, what we visualize TFA is an archive of memories that come together when we socially engage these public. So today only there are 3 deaths in our community, and I was thinking that such a loss of memory has been done. So it's a great loss for us in some way, and we couldn't archive that loss. So that's a bad thing. We couldn't, archive.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you. If anybody has any questions, oh, great. Yes.
This is not so much a question as an observation, a very tangential observation, and I wondered if somebody would respond to it. Has very little to do with the things you've been discussing here. But I was just thinking that in the present political moment in India, we are all forced to be archivists. There is a war on history, and everybody is preserving the multiple histories that we all embody. But there is also a great price to be paid for not having the tangible archive of documents. We have the CAA, the NRC, now the SIR, and you also in this moment see the privilege that has come to those of us who are able to preserve documents relating to our grandparents' generation, and how a poor farmer in Assam who's constantly been displaced by floods, or in Bihar whose documents have been destroyed, does not have the documents, and there is a grave price to be paid for this. And so in Goa again, everybody wants a Portuguese passport, and that has turned everybody into an archivist, sort of accessing all sorts of bureaucratic records. So I think in this present ideological moment, but also with the compulsions of bureaucracy, we have no option but to be archivists?
It was frightfully close to Naresh's comment, but I was remembering an essay. It could be like a social media amnesia, but I think it was an essay by Naeem Moiman talking about the Bangladesh revolution. And one of the first things that happened in this revolution was this kind of editing and burning down the national archives. And connecting to this thought about, do you think maybe the lack of this archival excavation has allowed us to this point where we are seeing this kind of editing of identity and these histories, and us being able to be being manipulated by them? That maybe somebody wants to respond to that.
I think it's there has never been a neutral moment. No, I think documentation of any kind and preservation, archiving of any form are micro sedimentations that build parallel histories, and often which leaks into history in that sense. I don't know if that lack of documentary evidence has come to the present moment. Maybe it might be a factor, because I'm also thinking of other cultures where rigorous documentation was part of, from the industrial age, very much part of the social fabric. And still that documentation could be used entirely differently in a span of years to the intent completely sort of evil and defiant and of the original purpose. So that's where we have to understand that it's not fixed. It's like electric, and that electric charge can sort of vary. This is how I think of it. That I feel that it's not a body to be removed and replaced, but rather a kind of environment which is very murky. And we get clarity of things because we chose that clarity of curation or looking, or say that, oh, this person's archive is important, or this photo looks amazing for the time that is, so I'm going to pay attention to it, or this happened, therefore this must work with. And contemporary photography, lot of political work in contemporary photography looks at archive and redigs this, and to say that the failure of archive is that it trusted in its truth as a solid given entity. So just to come back, I think that it's more murkier than that. Yeah.
Just to add, I think there's also a compulsion to fix history that is related to power. Like, this is exactly what happened. We see all the Bollywood films of today is trying to tell you exactly what happened and this is how it happened. And here you go, that's the history, So I think anybody's sort of any kind of an archive challenges that in some way, whatever it is. So it is never a fixed object, like you said. But I think the danger of the archive is that even the smallest little piece of paper can shake that fixed history, which is why there is so much of compulsion to destroy lived histories. That is why Palestine is being bombed, to destroy not only the people but their history, and then to say Palestine never existed. So it's that, I think, that even the smallest thing can shake it. And so therefore the archive is so dangerous, because you never know what in it could be that force that can topple a fixed history.
It's some experience I want to share. I was in we both were in Ajanta Ellora, and interestingly we met one auto rickshaw wala, and he told something very interesting about Aurangzeb, the cover of the Aurangzeb. It's very simple. He had a will and he kept money for his grave. And we thought that way he is telling us that story, way we learned in the book, in our textbook, was so different. Way I, as a Koli, see Marathas, Navy, and then our history, way our language has been contaminated. We, our religion means we believed ocean as a god, we believed big fish as a god, we believed moon as a god, and then our gods, which later came, or Portuguese came later, and then who sees history from what angle and what happened, what violence the mind goes through, or what vulnerabilities we can say the mind goes through, is so important to understand, because that actually decides what the archive will be. That these things are so, somebody else can tell, somebody who is from Kerala, he's artist, why Shivaji is so big figure in Bombay, like in Maharashtra. So I explained him that he's the one who built navy around the western coast. Then he doesn't know, because he has been seeing Shivaji through Shiv Sena also. So that people have been conditioned and look at the Shivaji in a different way, that so I don't know if we have to bring this in now in this, but I see all these things, and then what is my responsibility as an image maker, how I see image making process is really, we have to be so much responsible.
I think ultimately it's that, no? It's the responsibility. But I want to end with I think it's like, right now it's a funny story in my head. But basically, maybe 10, 12 years ago, when I was working as a conceptual artist with photography, I was asked to respond to these 130 found images in Chicago by these two American curators. But they were from somewhere around near Calcutta, near Bengal, okay? And we knew nothing about those images except that they were perhaps taken near Bishnupur. And the only thing that we knew for sure was that they were interred with these dates, okay? 3rd May 1945. So I decided to respond with the date, and I was very confident. And then my proposal was that I'm going to find somebody born on the exact same date, and then I will see what happens from that. And of course, I went to the municipal office, and as I thought, I don't know why I thought, but I thought that there will be a computer, and I can input the date, and there will be many names. But there was a rude shock. And then I was doing all kinds of embarrassing things, like stopping people on roads. Were you born on May 3rd, 1945? Going on the bus, literally getting the voting list and going, 8 o'clock in the morning. It was awful. Finally, I had to give a classified ad in a Bengali daily. And one person got in touch with me saying that my father was born on May 3rd, 1945. I said, where do you live? I'm coming right now. And that's how it happened. So anyway, thank you all. I also want to thank Ravi Jaltare. She's designed the book and all of the collaterals. Thank you very much, Ravi. Just say hi to everybody. All right. Good night. Bye.